I've had lots of challenging situations. I mean, all artists, I think, do. It's just part of the ball game. I would say one of the more recent challenging situations was this project that I put together of recording orchestra pieces of mine, orchestra pieces with soloists with the Malaga Philharmonic in Spain. It's a huge project. I've got to coordinate the orchestra. I've got to coordinate 3 soloists, get them there. One is in Seattle, one is in Mexico City, one is in New York. Right? Get them there. Make sure that the logistics are set up, because I don't use an agent, I don't have a manager, it's me. I do everything myself, which is what I try to teach my students too. You have to be ready to do all kinds of things. So this project, I had to fundraise, right, to pay for the engineer, who was based in Madrid, who had recorded this orchestra before, and he actually was on my previous CD. He recorded the previous CD, so I had worked with him. So I had to coordinate all that, all those moving parts, and then I conducted. So I had to be ready to conduct and be there. I had to deal with the record label to make sure that we had the record label set up and ready to go, so that when the master was finally done, it could go. It was extremely challenging. I mean, one of the things that I was very fortunate about, and I kind of had planned it that way, although some of it was also a little lucky, was that this gentleman who's the recording engineer had great ears and was a very good musician. And so while I was focused on trying to make sure I was conducting everything and keeping everything together, and you know, when you record in the studio, you do sections of your pieces, obviously, over and over. And while I could oftentimes tell that something had to be done over again, there were times where he really assisted and said, "Maestro, we need to go back and do measure, 15 through 55 because there was this noise or that thing, that I didn't catch because I was too busy conducting, or was something that was too slight for me to hear." So for that. So that was in February of 2017. So for that CD to finally come out in April of 2018, right, was a huge, huge achievement, and a huge, very positive, and it's gotten very good reviews and just tremendously positive feedback. It sounds great. It's very, very well recorded. It's beautiful packaging, the whole 9 yards. But it was extremely challenging to put all those moving parts together to the point where, to go back in December. No, November of right before that, so that's 2017, February. In December of November 16, I was at a festival in Cuba writing the orchestra piece, the final orchestra piece that's part of this CD. So I was like pushing like crazy to write this orchestra piece while I was at a festival in Cuba, trying to get this together so that when in February I got to Malaga, right, I could include this as the final piece. The other 3 pieces have the 3 soloists, and then I wanted to, and this piece is a culmination of the other 3 because it has aspects of the other 3 pieces in it. So it's like a piece that kind of ties everything together, and it's just for orchestra. So one of the most recent challenges, and there's always plenty of them, I would say this would be an example. So one of the traits that you have to have, I think, to be successful as a composer or as an artist of any kind is you have to really know how to problem solve. You have to problem solve. I mean, composing in many ways is problem solving. Because like, where do I go next? Okay, it's a problem. What instrument do I give this to? What do I do here? What do I do that? You're kind of solving problems in some way. So problem solving is very, very important, and being organized. I know that sounds contrary. Artists are supposed to be messy and this and that, and yeah, you can be messy in some things, but in other things you have to be really, really organized if you want things to really happen, to make them happen. So I would say problem solving and organizational skills are things I try to, I have a to-do list, I have, there are things I try to instill in my students. If you have a commission and it's not on time, that's the last commission you'll get from them. So if it's got to be done, it's got to be done. If you've got to drop everything and do it, you've got to drop everything and do it because it's got to be done. So those are the types of organizational things I talk about, okay. So that's why I take points off if you're late in your paper or your assignment is late. Either I don't accept it or you lose points. Dr. Garcia, that's kind of tough. Yeah, it's kind of tough because the real world is kind of tough. So I would say, to answer your question, I think those are, problem solving, which is something you just develop when you develop critical thinking, which is what I think is great about universities. That's why I'm glad I have all my degrees, not because of, there's other things that aren't that good, but developing critical thinking. If you're lucky enough, one of my majors is philosophy. That has helped me incredibly, because it helps you think outside the box, right? If you're an atheist and you take a class on Buddhism, you're challenged by Buddhism or by Christianity. If you're a Buddhist and you take atheism, those are classes that challenge you and they cause you to think in different ways. Doesn't mean you're going to become an atheist necessarily, but it makes you look at what you're doing in different ways, or vice versa. It doesn't mean I'm going to convert to become a Buddhist. Many atheists are going to convert to Buddhism because I took a Buddhism class. But so I always recommend, they say, well, we're trying to cut credits, we're trying to get everybody to graduate in 4 years and all this, and yeah, that's great, but you have to have some classes that help people think, right? And if you can install that into other classes, fine. Integrate it into that's great. But critical thinking, I think, is what helps you develop problem-solving skills in many ways.